Thanks for joining today's Tech Talk. This is Tech Talk number 6, Embedding Jaspersoft into your PHP application. Today's the 22nd of January. I'm joined by Mariano Luna. He works on the same team as I do. He's joining us from Houston, Texas. I'm in Dublin, Ireland. So if you haven't joined these Tech Talks before, the way this works is we have a presentation, and during the presentation we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, you can submit them in the question box, and we'll do our best to answer those live. And if you have questions that are not related to today's topic, don't hesitate to ask those as well. So anything else that you have with Jaspersoft that you need help on, we can do our best to answer them live. So we're going to start off today with a poll, just asking you a little bit about why maybe you're here today to embed Jaspersoft into your solution. We'll put up that poll question now and give you about a minute to vote. So it's really about how you use or plan to use Jaspersoft, whether you're using it as a standalone app or embedded into other applications. All right, so it looks like most people have voted now, so we're going to put up the results just so you guys are aware. Okay, so looks like, yeah, a good spread. No Java, no Java users, but about a quarter of the folks are embedding into a PHP app. So great. All right, so with that, we'll get Mariano to get started. Welcome to the show, Mariano, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ernesto. That's a good thing that we have people also embedding in other technologies, because most of the things we're going to be talking about will relate also to embedding the application into different technologies, not only PHP. But we'll focus on that for the samples and also to present the new wrapper. So a little bit of the overview of what are we going to talk today, and I will initially start with talking about the REST API that Jaspersoft exposed and allows us to use the Jasper services from different applications. As you know, REST is it's a pretty standard. You can operate and work with that from different technologies, so it's a really good way to embed the application into your current application and have full reporting functionalities and a BI stack into what you already have, either being that an existing commercial application or an intranet. It's good to give your end users a seamless experience with their data. I'll talk a little bit about the iFrame integration and REST API integration, how each one work and what the benefits we get from either side. The good thing is that we can mix and match them, so while embedding, we'll probably do that on a regular basis. I'll give a quick overview of the single sign-on and user management. That's probably a topic for a full tech talk by itself, but I will explain at a high level what that entitles. Since we're talking about two different applications that have security, we will be able to let Jasper know that some other application is the one in charge of that security and be able to create a single sign-on between the two applications. So again, you give the end user that one point of access experience. And then, of course, when working with the integrating and embedding, the Jasper server themes are pretty interesting because it gives you the capability of working with Jasper UI to mimic what you already have company-wide or in the application you're embedding. And of course, since we will be talking about PHP, we will be using a new wrapper library that came out with version 5, and that allows you from the PHP environment, gives you a full library that you can abstract and work through the server a lot simpler than having to create your own REST client and integrate that in a more easy way from the programmer side. Okay, so we probably have seen this slide a couple of times if you have been around Jasper, but the main things that I want to point out here is that Jasper was built to be embedded, so you have a lot of things that you can leverage here. The full UI, it's CSS based, so it's very easy to customize to fit your needs. Those CSS and images are actually stored in the Jasper Server repository, so you can have more than one look and feel for your application. And there are URL parameters that you can access through the HTTP API that allows you to change that on the fly while you're requesting pages for the Jasper server. And of course, REST will allow you to access all the underlying services for Jasper. This is just a quick overview of the stack, and it gives you kind of a bird's eye view of how Jasper works internally, and that way you can leverage those functionalities and those services from outside the Jasper instance to bring that into a different environment. Okay, a little bit about the REST API we talked about. So we know that the JasperReports Server has its own UI, and you have a lot of services that are provided there. Good thing is that most, if not all, of those services are available through the REST API. So you can manage elements in the Jasper Server repository, and you have report services that allows you to receive a render report, receive an export of that report in a PDF or Excel format. You can access the scheduler, input controls, and everything. And also a full set of admin services that allows you to control users on the Jasper side, access control of repository resources and schedule jobs, and manage those schedules. So you can check how many jobs you have running currently, where are the next triggers, and so forth. And that allows you to interact with the server and build layers on top of that that can simplify either your user access or your admin access, depending on what side of the fence you're in and what parts you want to integrate. So up to the REST side, that's exactly the same for any technology that you want to use. And this is fully documented in our web services guide. In particular for PHP, with the version 5, there is a new project that it's on the it was developed by Jasper, and it's part of also of our community project, and it's a wrapper library for PHP. And that wrapper library will allow us to abstract all the interactions from our PHP application to Jasper in a very simple way. And you will see that in a sample in a couple of minutes, but the idea is that you can work with the server by handling a class in PHP. The REST API, as you know, will work with either JSON or XML elements. The wrapper will take care of those elements, transform those into objects that you can easily manipulate from inside PHP. So it gives you a very rich functionality on working with the server without having to handle everything on your own.
Mariano, I'm going to stop you for just a second. Yeah. Since we have a lot of customers probably using many, many different versions of the product, just want to point out a couple of things. The REST API was introduced in version, I might be lying, but I think it's 4.2. And then
yes, 4.2.
So 4.2 and above has the REST API, and then the PHP wrapper library was introduced in version 5. Now, whether that's backward compatible with other versions of the REST API, I'm not sure. It was tested with version 5.0. So just be aware of that. In previous versions, the only API that existed out of the server would be the SOAP API. Now that doesn't mean that if you're on version 4 you can't build a PHP application. It just means you won't get our wrapper library. So that's just something I wanted to point out, and you can continue, Mariano. Thank you.
Yeah, and going forward with that thought, the actual REST API got a big overhaul in the version 4.7. So most of the things that you will see on the PHP wrapper leverages those services that were exposed in the 4.7 and 5.0 versions.
Okay, would that be REST v2 if you're looking at the API?
Yes.
Okay.
If you're looking
great.
at the API doc, it will be REST v2. And most of those improvements were in simplifying the access specifically to the management of the input controls and management of the resources in the repository. So if you're on a different version of Jasper, on a 4X version, you will see that if you grab the latest API documentation, it's a lot easier now to manage those resources and to work with those input controls with either just one call to the server instead of having to do multiple calls as you had to do with the initial versions of the REST API. So this is just to show you typically how this architecture will work from your application. So we know PHP works in a LAMP or WAMP environment fairly straightforward. So you will still have your Apache web server or any other web server that will be handling your PHP code in the front end, connecting to your clients and managing all the operational level access to your database from the PHP application. And now when you want to add the reporting piece to that application, instead of having to build everything from scratch, what you can do is just leverage everything that Jasper provides. So you can have a JasperReports Server running, and this is actually separated out, but you can have them running on the same instance. That will depend on the scalability that you're looking for and your specific deployment, but JasperReport will be running on a Tomcat container that can be run directly on the same systems that you will be able to run your PHP application. The connection or the communication between your application and the server will be using either REST or SOAP or the HTTP API. And Jasper will also access the same database for generating the reports that you need. So the good thing here is that from the PHP side, you don't have to develop a full reporting environment just to give your users access to the data that they are building or creating at an operational level. And you can leverage the full UI and all the elements that the Jasper reporting library gives you to bring them pixel perfect reports or analysis to your customers. So a little bit going into what the client gives us and that wrapper that we were talking about. So the client is fairly straightforward to use. It's a PHP class, and you can build your own wrapper for other technologies if you want. The idea of creating a wrapper on top of an existing API, so you don't have to take care of all the internal communications and the transformation you need to get those objects that you have in either JSON or XML and build something that is easier for you to manipulate on your technology. So invoking the client is pretty straightforward. You just call the class and with that class you have to create a connection before using that. As you can see in this example, I have everything in my local host, so I'm just connecting to the server, to the Jasper server on the standard 8080 port that Tomcat uses. You give the username and password that you're going to be using to connect, and here's where a lot of things come to your mind, because in this case I'm just hard coding those, but you will have the option of using either a single sign-on process. So when you're calling Jasper Client, you will be using your own user, the ones that you have created on your application. If you created a full SSO implementation, you can rely on an external client. So let's say your application can rely on LDAP or CAS for a user authentication. Jasper can do the same. So you will have that information to pass on through the client. And of course, if you're using multi-tenancy, in the connection you have to pass the organization name, so Jasper can connect and know exactly who is, which part of the repository should expose.
Okay, so one thing, Mariano, is maybe you could imagine that here you would just add a check, maybe if your application, if the user exists on the Jasper side, then log in. If he doesn't exist, then create him, that sort of thing.
Exactly, and since you have services through REST that allows you to manipulate users in Jasper, you can create them on the fly at that point. And instead of using an SSO implementation from the Jasper side, you can implement that directly in your logic. So you can connect with an admin privileged user to your server, create that user object, and then log back in, so you can access whatever that user will, that user role will enable them to. So in the other snippet of code we have here is just a simple way to get the elements of the Jasper server repository. So the repository in Jasper is where you have all your report units and dashboards and everything that can be consumed by your end user. So the client has a really nice way of getting the full repository and giving you an object that you can iterate and get all the elements for each one of the resources you have there. This is just a simple query. I'm doing a get repository with no arguments, so it will give me the full list at that level, and just iterating through that, I'm just printing out the name. You will see in the sample that I will show you in a minute that I do a little bit more than that, so I can manipulate those objects accordingly. So if the resource is a folder, I can link that to a subsequent call to see the contents of that folder. If the resource type is a report unit, I just can link that to the part of my code that will be handling the rendering of those reports. But the idea is that you receive a full resources descriptor that will give you all the elements of that particular resource. Once you have that resource descriptor and you're working with a particular report unit, you will see that each element has what we call a URI string. So that URI string is the location in the Jasper server repository. So with that URI string, you can use the same our client library to generate renders of that report in any of the same formats that we support from the UI. So in the first sample, I'm just executing a simple report, passing no parameters at all, and just asking for an HTML rendering of that. And since the HTML string that I receive, I can just echo that out to the screen. But in a particular implementation, you will want to do a little bit more there. You can run the report and ask for a specific page of that report. In the descriptor, you will have all the elements that the reports need to be executed. So if you have input controls, like in the second example, you can query for that in the resource and use the client to get the input controls context, and you can render those directly for the user. Remember that when you're using APIs, like in this case, you are in charge of rendering all that information to your user. So Jasper will give you all the information you need. With a get report input controls, I will get the full set of input controls. They will have an ID. They will have the type of input control that you need to use, and you will have to render those depending on the display level that you have. In the case of PHP, I will assume that you're working with a web application, so you will have to render that either as a select box, multi-selects, checkbox, depending on the type of input control that you receive. And all that information is in the input control itself. Once you get the user input for those controls, for passing those to the run report unit, you just pass those as an array. So in the case of multi-select, you will pass the array of the selections of the user. If it's a single select, just the value that you need. And by passing those controls to the report unit, you can get the rendering of that report with that specific input. One thing that you will notice is that Jasper also supports what we call cascading input controls. And the idea of a cascading control is that you will need the input of a previous parameter to render the second input control. The good thing there is that you can use the same API to interact instead of through your PHP application, through Ajax, and get the JSONs for those controls and mimic the functionality that comes with Jasper directly from there. So it gives you a lot of flexibility on how you can render that. You can work from the PHP side, you can work from the JavaScript side, and get the information that you need to render that particular set of filters.
Cool. Quick question, Mariano. So you said the input control values would come back as JSON, but everything else comes back at XML. Is that right?
You can decide how you want to do the call. So you will see on the API and also in the documentation for the wrapper that the get reports input control, you can ask for a specific format. So you can, when you're doing the call to get the input controls, you can request that response in XML or in JSON.
Oh, that's great. I actually didn't know that. Thank you.
Exactly. So normally when you're calling from within the PHP, you will receive the XML format because it's easier. You have a simple XML class that allows you to iterate through that very easy. But when you're working from JavaScript, it's way better to receive those in JSON. Okay. So I think that after this slide, this is just for helping me to show a little bit of what we have talked up to now and why REST and iFrames and what are you bringing to the table with each one of those implementations. So up to now we talk about the REST API. So the REST API is great because you have full programmatic control of the rendering of the elements, of the calls that you do of the server, or of everything that you want to do with the Jasper server backend. So it's great when you're looking about working with canned reports, so reports that exist in the repository and you want to expose those to your users. The other thing that you will want to think about is that Jaspersoft has some great functionality in terms of interactivity and a good UI for analysis. Instead of having to recreate all that into your application and doing thousands of calls to Jasper to bring that interactivity to life, it's way better to leverage the idea that Jasper has of working with themes to customize the UI and bring that in an iFrame to your application. So in the sample that I have, and I'll just jump into that after this slide, you will see that I use both methods because each one has their benefits. And the way that you control that, you see a couple of screenshots here. This is a sample we're looking at. This is an actual application that is using REST web services to bring report units. So you can control the way you show the repository and everything, but that's all up to you to generate the code to build that part. On the iFrame side, it's a little bit different. You customize the Jasper Server UI, and you bring all that functionality that's already built to your application. So you have benefits on both of them, and I'll say that most implementation will use a mix of them, because it enables you to have really good interactivity on one side and full control of the server and the output of those reports on the other hand. So let me jump into the sample so we can see a couple of the things I have been talking about up to now in action. So this sample, I will give you the link at the end. This is actually available for you. You can go ahead and install it and play with it. So for the single sign-on part, and we'll talk after that about the options you have there, I decided to go the lazy way here. So since my PHP application, the only thing it does is actually integrate Jasper in a way. It doesn't do anything in particular. I decided to use Jasper as my authentication provider. So instead of having my own authentication system in PHP, I'm just relaying that on Jasper. And the REST API has functions that allow you to see if a user is authenticated. It will give you a session ID on Jasper, so you can use that session ID to initiate iFrames where the user will be already logged in. So let's jump and log into that. You will see when you install it, there's a simple README that talks about what the sample does. You have the access to the wrapper library documentation, which is really useful to show you exactly what you can do with the PHP wrapper. And I have two tabs here. One uses web services, and the other one uses the UI integration through iFrames. So as you can see with web services, I can do those calls similar to the one we saw in the code snippet before, just to bring my full repository and just render that. In this case, I just use a simple list with icons to show the folders. So if you run this sample, you will see that if you hover any of the elements, I'm just putting the full resource descriptor XML there, so you can see all the elements that Jasper will actually give you when you do a call to the repository. So you see that you have a type of resource, you have the URI string, which is important to make calls, subsequent calls to the API. You have the resource type, the properties that pertain to that particular resource. And the way that I'm integrating these, if I'm working with folders, I do a call back to my application to receive the contents of that folder, and that way I can go farther down the line to list the report units. So when
just a quick question, Mariano. When you were hovering over, there was something like permission mask, prop security permission mask.
Yes.
Does that mean that the repository security is ignored by the REST API and then you have to rebuild it, or is that something else?
No, that actually is something else. I logged in myself as an admin, and any user that has access to the security of an object will receive that. What that is showing you is actually the mask of the permission setting that that particular object has. If you log in with a different user, and I'll do that in a minute, you will see that the elements that you cannot see in the repository will not be sent to you because the security layer is still there on the Jasper side. That's just the masking. When you go and right-click on the Jasper UI and see the properties of an object, you will see also the permissions that that object has set.
Oh, okay, makes sense.
You can set the permissions there, okay?
All right, but and there is, I guess there is an API that I could say for the employee's account, change the mask to something else.
Exactly.
Okay.
You have control of the security, and you can do that. Of course, your user will have to have enough permissions on that particular resource to change the permission settings. So you need admin privilege to do that. If not, the API will actually respond with you don't have enough permissions to do that operation.
All right. Cool. Thanks for that.
Okay. So as you can see, I did that for all of them, and since this is a sample, the idea is that you can see a lot of things printed out more for knowing what type of resources you're getting and doing some debugging on the implementation. So in this case, this employee accounts is a report unit. As you can see, you do have properties of prompting for input controls, of the input control layout that you have. If I go to another one, you may have different values there. You can choose to ignore those elements, but they are there for you to actually read and figure out, okay, what type of questions should I ask the user to handle that particular resource. So if I click on the report, I have a simple view report page. I just listed a couple of the export formats here so I can play with them. As you see, this report had an input control, so I had to go and render that input control. Jasper will give me all the information, so as we saw in the code snippet before, I can do a call and it will receive all the elements to populate my select. I know, I just printed that out so you can see that the input control type is a single select, so that's what I render here. And I can choose any of the elements and pass that to the report. And in the case of HTML, I decided just to print out the output directly here without any type of paging or anything. You can implement your own pager, and the API allows you to ask for a specific page in the report. So that's a way you can do it. You can get the full report, all the total amount of pages, and instead of rendering everything like I did here and just print it out one page after the other, you can ask for a specific page, print that one, and go forward from there. And
So that's great, because that was one of the questions, was how does pagination work in the API, so it sounds like you've answered that one. And then I've got another question, which is, can you pass any sort of export parameters to the JasperReports library at this point? Like, if I know HTML has a, ignore pagination, or, XLS has, is there any sort of exposed stuff in the REST API as far as you know?
No, it's not, and I'll tell you why. Because those parameters are set in the report unit themselves, in the JRXML. So at this point, I'm just executing the JRXML. But what you can do with the REST API is deploy a JRXML on the fly. So if you want to go the whole 9 yards, you can have like a standard JRXML, do those modifications on your side, deploy that to a repository, and ask the server to run that particular report. But from the run report command, you're running what it's already on the server. That's why you cannot pass those parameters.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. So the export formats, I just listed a few here. I just hard-coded those, but all the export formats that are available from the server are available from the from the API. So you can get PDF, Excel, or paginated, non-paginated, and so forth. So you can get a full PDF there. I decided to just force the download of the PDF. You can show that inside your application, but the way it works is very similar to what you will see from the Jasper user interface. And as you see in the case of a format different than HTML, I'm just choosing to expose that and let the user download the document instead of just printing whatever I receive there. If you think about it, this is pretty powerful because you're receiving the full stream. So from your application, you can decide to write that in your file system, to deliver that in an email, to do other things with the report unit themselves. Because in this case, I'm just grabbing the string and shooting that back to the browser, but you can add your logic into that. Okay. So from web services, the other interesting point is that you can also access the scheduler. So if you want to schedule a job on the Jasper backend, you can do that directly from the web services API. You have a full set of calls that deal with the job scheduling. And one of the things that is interesting to know is that the services that the Jasper scheduler offers through the API are richer than the ones that you have from the Jasper UI. So it will give you the ability to create calendars on the scheduler, meaning that you can set days that are designated as holidays or non-working days, and then create a scheduled job that will run a report only on what are called working days in your calendar. And you can create as many calendars as you want on the backend scheduler. The other part of embedding, and we talked in the last slide, is leveraging the Jasper UI. So in this other Jasper UI integration tab that I have here, I did something completely different. I created a small menu, navigation menu on my application to access different elements on the Jasper repository. So as you know, Jasper has what we call an HTTP API, and it's a way of grabbing specific elements in the repository and addressing them through URL. So if you see the Jasper URL while you're using Jasper UI, you will see that you have a flow with a flow name, which tells you which part of the application you're in, and that flow name can have parameters, and you can execute everything from there. So by leveraging that and leveraging the themes, which I will talk in a minute, I'm bringing part of the Jasper UI into my application. So this is the library page for the ones that have used Jasper for 7 and 5. You know that this new library page gives you a list of all the report units, dashboards, and everything that you have on the application, and allows the user to interact and run or schedule those reports. So it's an easy way to bring a full reporting environment without doing a lot of programming work. So I'm just have everything set up on the Jasper side, and I expose this library to the user. He can go here and do quick searches and go ahead and execute a specific dashboard. And now it's a lot simpler than what I had on my REST API, because I'm just leveraging everything Jasper will give me. So I can click on a dashboard and get that directly on my screen. If I choose a dashboard that actually works, that would be great. I can go to the repository view and see the full objects that I have on their own containers. And as you know, the CSS here, I did a very, very mild change. I just took everything that it was on the Jasper branding and the background color, and I left everything the same, but you can work in changing those icons and changing font size and all the CSS to match your application.
Yeah, that's definitely a key point there, and it seems like the CSS matches your application pretty well just by default, but yeah, certainly know that it's fully customizable so that you can match the fonts, the colors, the spacing, the boxes, the shading. All that stuff can be completely changed.
Exactly. And then in this case, since I built this sample, I actually used a color scheme that was pretty similar, so I didn't have to change that. But everything is customizable there, and you will see that I have a couple of slides that we talk about that, but you have full control of everything here, and that's kind of the good part of using this UI integration. As you can see, I have a link that goes directly to a dashboard. You have all the functionality of the new charting libraries, and you don't have to do anything from your side to leverage this. Just bring the iframes, get the single sign-on working. In terms of executing specific reports, well, now Jasper takes care of my input control, so I don't have to do anything in my side, and I can just apply those and work with what Jasper gives me. I have the same UI. I now can leverage the full interactivity of the interactive viewer of Jasper. So everything that I have from the Jasper UI, I'm bringing the same thing to my application. Let's say I want to work with the, I don't know, changing the formatting, arranging my columns, resorting, having the asynchronous loading of my reports. Since I'm bringing Jasper UI, I have all that for free. And as you can see, and this is a minor thing, but in this actual report that I'm linking directly, I took care from my theme to get rid of the back button here, since there's nowhere to go back from my application. You can do the same for the save button or the export if you don't want the user to export that. Okay.
Yeah, that's really nice. It seems like you're talking us out of using the PHP API, because it would be like quite a bit of work to build my own pagination, build my own input controls. I lose interactivity, so it's compelling, I'd say, to do it this way versus the PHP API way.
That's why I said that you will probably use a mix of those, because you know what? I can use the PHP API to get the exact URI of this report, so I don't have to hard code anything in my application. So I can jump from something like my view of the repository, and when I click on a particular report unit, instead of rendering that through the API, I can just bring that the same way I did here in an iframe. So the PHP API still is a good thing because it gives you lower level access to the repository. And as I said before, you can deploy a report on the spot. When you go to create an ad hoc view and get all the ad hoc functionality of Jasper, you know what? You can deploy these topics or a full domain from the API directly for that user. So I think that the answer is you will use both, and the right tool for the job is the one that will give you most of the functionality without having to do a lot on your own.
Yep, it makes perfect sense.
Okay. So before we run out of time and we can get back with more questions, I want to just go over a couple of things that I talked about, but we didn't get too deep into, like single sign-on and the themes. So you will see in my sample, I cheated out on the SSO. As I said, I'm using Jasper to authenticate, so it's a little bit easier. But Jasper gives you a variety of providers. We are built on Spring Security for those that know Java. So you can easily integrate Jasper with LDAP or Active Directory or use CAS as a single sign-on mechanism. So if you have that in your application, it will be a good thing because you can do the same with Jasper and use the same authenticator for both of them. The other option that you have is, of course, extend the security of Jasper, and your application can be the security provider. So I'll go over a quick overview how that works internally. As I said, this is probably a full topic for another tech talk, but the idea of Spring Security is that you have entry points and filters that you can hook into. So in this case, the SSO server can be your LDAP server, which you have configuration from default, but this can be your own application. So when Jasper receives a request, you have an entry point there, and you can extend that to redirect your login to your application. And then when that happens, redirect back to Jasper from the provider and get either a validation ticket or get Jasper to go directly to your database and grab the token for the session of the user, you name it. You have a lot of points there that you can use to interact to your server. So you have the entry points, the auth provider, validations in between, post-processing of authentication, and what Jasper will do at the end of the stack will just sync the internal database to what you have asked. So if you do a full SSO integration, you can create users on the fly through the SSO process, which is a really nice thing. And the other part, and we talked a little bit with Ernesto a few minutes ago, it's working with the themes and working with the Jaspersoft UI. So Jasper, you will see that if you log in as an admin, you have this themes folder in the UI. This is the full CSS stack that Jaspersoft uses. You can override any element you have here, meaning that you can override CSS, you can override all the sprites and icons which are in the image folder, and change fully how this works. So these folders, you don't like them, you take them out, the way that all the icons and the toolbars render, you can change all that and have full control on how the user interface looks. The themes, if you go through the user interface, if you right-click on a theme, you're able to download that. It will give you a zip file with all the CSS and the images. And the other interesting part there is that when you create a new theme on Jasper, if you don't define something on your own theme, Jasper will loop to the default theme for that definition. So it works like overlays over the default theme, and that's actually a really good way to implement that. You can have a master theme with the UI that you need, and then just have different overlays depending on how you talk to the server. And the theme that you want Jasper to render something can be passed as a URL parameter, which is also a really nice thing, and that's the way I'm using in the UI integration sample that I have. And if you want, there's documentations about the UI, but I think that the best thing is if you go to, if you log in as an admin and go to the view menu, you have a sample UI page, and that page will actually show you all the elements rendered and give you the classes for the CSS for each one of the elements. You have the standard layouts, all the components of the UI. So when you're designing UI, this page will be your friend because you can see exactly how everything gets rendered without having to go and click lower around the UI to get everything to render and see if everything fits where you put it. I know, Ernesto, if we have some more questions and
yeah, there's a few questions that have come in. Let's do another poll question now. It's just about your level of knowledge in Jaspersoft, just so that we can help guide future shows and the content. And then we've actually only got a few questions from the audience today, so we'll maybe wrap up a little bit early. But so what's your level of expertise with Jaspersoft? If everybody could just vote on that, if you're a beginner, intermediate, or a Jedi.
Can I vote?
No, unfortunately we can't vote. So one of the questions while people are voting, Mariano, is about downloading the example application. I don't know if you have a way to get to your GitHub account.
Okay. Yeah, I'll post the link right now. I'll leave that slide there, and we'll post the link on the chat. So the full sample that you were looking at and that I used there, it's on GitHub.
Okay, if you send that to the chat, I can repost it to everybody so they have the actual URL.
I just send that to you, Ernesto, so you can.
Okay, so then I'll just go through some more questions here. Is SOAP Web Services going away in favor of REST, or are both here to stay? That's actually a really good question. I don't want to get into too much trouble without having somebody from product management talk about that specifically, but you might notice that new features tend to be going into the REST API versus the SOAP API. So the dashboards API, I think that we're introducing, things like that are starting to go REST only. So while there are no official plans to end of life SOAP, anytime soon, we're trying to entice people to move to REST, and that might be a hint as to what may happen in the future. Mari, I don't know if you have a better answer than that, but
no, I think that you did it pretty well. One thing that you will notice if you go through our projects is that the SDKs for mobile access, both of them are using the REST API also. So as Ernesto said, there are no actual plans on suspending the support for SOAP. That still is there in the product, and for the foreseeable future is there, but the new features, you will see that REST will get a little bit of priority there on getting those in, and it gives you, I think that it gives you an easier way to handle the all the services from Jasper.
Excellent. So we've got the poll response here. Looks like there's a lot of people on the dark side. Nobody has become a Jedi. All right, that's my joke today. All right, so we've posted a couple of links there. If you're interested in downloading Mariano's PHP sample, you can get it from GitHub there. Next question.
Notice, oh, sorry, Ernesto. You will
no,
notice
go ahead.
On the repository there, I just give the link directly to one of the branches, which is the one that I was working on, and that has the implementation I show you today. So get that branch, and probably in the next couple of days that will be merged on the master branch, but the GRS wrapper branch is the newest one there.
All right, and it looks like your GitHub icon is a South Park character.
Exactly.
All right. I've seen worse. So the final question today, unless there's, some more coming. So does the REST API support the ability to read a security XML file from a domain object and then write or update that same security file? So he's asking, can I download the security file, make a change to it, and then upload it? I don't know the answer to that.
Let me quickly look. I'm pretty sure that that's available. You can replace a repository server. I'm not sure if you were. I think, and don't hold me on this one, but I think that you have to update the full resource, meaning that you download the whole domain and you will have to upload the whole domain, but probably I'll have to check the documentation for that. But you do have the option of getting resources. So if you go, just talking about the PHP side, on the sample that I have, I gave access to the PHP client class. So on the repository service, you will see that you have options to updating new resources and updating an existing resource in the server. So you can also delete if you have that access level. And you can get the full domain definition if you want, but I'll check the documentation and get back, but I think that you have to upload the full domain definition with the new security file into it.
Okay, so just for the questions that don't get fully answered live, really all the questions, we actually type them out into the page and also upload a YouTube video. So just be aware that if you want to review anything that was shown or we didn't answer a question live, it'll be answered in the next few days.
Okay. Now, I was going to say one thing, that remember when you define a domain, your internationalization bundles and the security file can be linked to that domain, and they can be repository elements by themselves, which is a best practice there for you. So if that's how you define your domain, you can just get that repository element, which is the security file, and update it for a new one with no problem.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point, Mariano. So yes, it is supported. Whether it's a direct call into the domain API or it's just a regular update, plain old update resource. All right, very good, Mariano. One last question. Does Jaspersoft support give support for the REST API? Yes, that is true. You will get your questions answered. Now, if your question's about, I'm trying to make a call, from my application and how do I do it? Like, you can't come and ask support, how do you do it? You can ask support, I'm doing it this way and it's not giving me what I thought I should get, if that makes any sense. So don't expect them to write your code for you. Our services people would have to do that as part of a paid engagement, but in general, it's more specific questions about the API, not open-ended ones.
Exactly. Yeah, about the use of the API and the services that are provided there and how they work, but not writing your code per se.
Yep, exactly. Okay, guys, so the next Tech Talk is here in Europe. It'll be at 10 a.m. GMT. So it will be about 4 in the morning for those in the U.S. So you can watch it. You can watch it recorded, but it's about using iReport with a domain. So it'll be an interesting one because it's a hot topic a lot of the times when I talk to people. So okay, great. Well, Mariano, thank you very much for hosting or for presenting in today's show. It was a very nice demonstration you put together for everybody. I'm also curious, would you be able to share the slides as well? Because it seems like one of those good, just, how to get started with PHP and Jaspersoft. That seems to be like the best resource I've seen. So I don't know if you have a SlideShare account, or if you just, or if I can just post them.
Yeah, you can just post them, or I can get that to you, so we can link those from the Tech Talk page.
Okay, great. Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Please tune in to future shows as well. Your participation is very appreciated, and I hope you got a lot of today's session. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.